Tycoon catches black cleaner studying in the dark. What happens next surprises everyone. A door on Manhattan's skyline glittered like a field of diamonds, but inside Marcus Langston's 25 million penthouse, a shadow dared to defy him. The real estate tycoon, silk robe brushing marble, jaw clenched with inherited arrogance, froze mid-step. In the center of his glass-walled living room, a lone flashlight cut the darkness. Amara Johnson, 27. A cleaner whose shift had ended an hour ago, was still there, her worn uniform clinging to dignity, her books sprawled with formulas on finance so advanced they could collapse an empire. Marcus's voice sliced through the silence. "You're trespassing in my world." He expected fear. Instead, Amara lifted her eyes with a calmness that unsettled him. Her cleaning cart was already polished and packed, proof that her duties were done. But her finger traced notes on insider trading, forged deals, hidden ledgers, details Marcus knew existed only in vaults. His fists tightened, pulse rising. How could she know? The contrast burned. His silk robe against her faded sleeves, his billions against her fight to breathe. Yet her gaze didn't waver. With one quiet breath, Amara whispered words that cracked his certainty. "The dark reveals things you keep buried." For the first time in years, Marcus felt cornered, and Amara looked like she held the key to something that could ruin him forever. What happens next will shock you. Amara Johnson graduated summa cum laude from NUU with a finance degree, a transcript learned with top score, besor, in the capstone modeling municipal bond risk that professors praised as publication ready. Recruiters praised her at fairs, then declined with coded lines about fit and polish on background checks pulled biased flags. Bills waited regardless. Her mother rationed insulin, stretching every vial. Receipts from the pharmacy piled beside stacked envelopes, numbers circled in red. Her younger sister Naima taped campus brochures above a desk in their small Brooklyn apartment and whispered dreams about macroeconomics and research labs, trying not to watch the rent due date approach. Amara stared at those brochures every night and decided that polite applications would not move an entrenched machine. She built another path. A cleaning contractor posted graveyard shifts in luxury towers across Manhattan, access badges included. She signed up, bought durable shoes, and configured a used Android with a cracked corner, a pay-as-you-go plan, and a discreet camera app that muted the shutter. If firms would not open a door, she would enter buildings whose upper floors wrote the rules. That is how she stepped into the world of Marcus Langston. Langston Development controlled prime blocks of the skyline through shells, affiliates and debt vehicles whose names sounded neutral and distant. Marcus spoke at cherry galas about revitalization, then built communities for projects that benefited friends. He maintained lawyers who knew zoning like chess and lobbyists who treated city hall corridors as home turf. Permits moved faster when envelopes traveled first. Vendors competed for contracts after bid specifications had already been tailored. In the penthouse that doubled as his command center, marble stairs curved to a mezzanine library. A sleek office faced the skyline, a glass X, twin ultra-wide monitors and a locked cabinet hidden within walnut panels. Night sealed the room in a mirror of lights. Amara learned the contours quickly because cleaners signed for keys no one else wants to carry. She moved silently, mapping cameras, blinds and door sensors. Her cart rolled without squeaks. Bottles were labeled, cloths folded into thirds to maximize surface coverage. 6 months of rotation placed her in Marcus's residence 3 nights a week, always between midnight and 4. She performed every task with precision, then studied patterns. Marcus arrived late, often after chauffeur dinners that left the scent of cedar and whiskey drifting from his coat. He liked the office at 1 a.m. Noise-canceling headphones on, screens alive with spreadsheets and dashboard. He dictated memos into his phone using cool, clipped phrases. Sometimes he paced by the windows, watching bridges wink silver. One night he answered a video call, camera pointed at the desk rather than his face, as a fixer explained that a planning commissioner wanted assurances before voting on a rezoning near the river. Marcus said he would make the path comfortable, then requested a meeting schedule that never appeared in public calendars. Another week an email thread left open on the side monitor displayed headers referencing revised valuations, timing signals, and a friendly syndicate willing to enter late on terms only insiders would accept. Amara kept dusting, eyes sweeping, brain recording. Her budget phone stayed hidden in a zippered pocket. A silent camera app captured wire instructions, notebook initials and screen reflections. Each file moved at dawn into an encrypted archive with careful tags. Budget gear forced discipline. She checked focus, cropped out timestamps and transferred files to an encrypted folder each morning before sleep. She made spreadsheets cataloging audio snippets, images, notes on context and public records that confirmed relationships. She practiced restraint, taking only what authenticity required. Meanwhile, Marcus treated staff like furniture that complied. He never learned names. He issued directives without greeting and scolded a porter for streaks on a window that faced the hard way. Tip envelopes appeared only during holidays, and even then were thin. He praised loyalty when it marketed well and dismissed it when it became inconvenient. Security understood the tone and followed it. Amara kept her head down and listened. Workers murmured about altered invoices. A stray flash drive label later matched shell filings in a public database. She matched dates to transfers happening hours after council votes. She noticed a pattern of forged signatures, when a notary stamp repeated without variation. Everything she gathered stayed quiet behind passwords no one would guess, including a simple phrase only her sister would understand. At home, life squeezed tight. Insulin copays climbed, cheaper meals spiked glucose, and Naima balanced bookstore shifts, with scholarship forms at the kitchen table. Hope required a calendar. She told herself that understanding capital flows did not matter if she could not redirect one toward a clinic drawer holding insulin. Her degree had taught her valuation, derivatives, compliance maps, and the mathematics of risk. The city taught her who bore the consequences when those maps bent. Working nights brought access much faster than any internship. In the penthouse, she memorized the office keypad rhythm, watched Marcus stash paper ledgers behind the walnut panel, recorded the slight hitch in the second drawer, and practiced placing every item back precisely. She tracked his caffeine patterns, knew which espresso strength accompanied delicate calls, and used that timing to clean alternate rooms, appearing and disappearing like a shadow. She catalogued visitors. A partner with a sapphire cufflink arrived every other Thursday, a consultant with a camel coat leaned too close while discussing options, and a lobbyist wearing an old union pin left a folder marked community benefits that contained figures never mentioned at hearing. Marcus's routines wrapped around arrogance. He believed access he could control. He trusted wealth to insulate him from scrutiny. He maintained a charming public voice, and an impatient private one, the latter sharp enough to cut. Amara studied both because power always reveals itself through rhythm. Her plan formed slowly, not as revenge but as correction. If institutions closed ranks, evidence would force them open. She set a timeline measured by risk exposure and family needs. Insulin came first, tuition planning followed. Everything else aligned around times. She went to the library during daylight, used public terminals to cross-reference land records, and read consent decrees to understand how prosecutors documented intent. She learned whistleblower provisions, calculated potential awards, and studied protections in case retaliation arrived. She practiced statements out loud until each sentence felt precise enough to survive scrutiny. She printed nothing, carried nothing unnecessary, and backed up everything across 2 services with multi-factor authentication. Back in the penthouse, Marcus remained unaware. He rehearsed keynote remarks for a redevelopment conference, while a construction manager texted him photos of a fence line pushed onto public land. He laughed when a council aide asked for event tickets, promised a table, and then told his assistant to bill the expense to outfit. His attention drifted only when he glimpsed the reflection of a uniform passing the office doorway, then dismissed it because uniforms always passed. Amara never lingered after tasks. She set coasters parallel, aligned pens, swept errant crumbs, and left zero trace of observation. Her body remembered routes around motion sensors. Her mind carried the numbers. When she finally closed the door each night, she glanced once at the skyline and promised herself she would convert hoarded advantage into a ledger entry that favored people who never entered rooms like this. The plan no longer felt like hope. It felt like work, measured, disciplined, and almost ready. Soon, at 2 in the morning, when the city lights hummed like a distant current, Amara positioned herself deliberately at the glass table in Marcus Langston's penthouse. Her uniform was pressed but worn, her card tucked neatly into the corner, as proof her shift was finished. She opened the finance textbook, its margins filled with her notes, and placed a small flashlight across the page. Every action was intentional, every gesture precise. She knew Marcus would appear, and she wanted him to find her there, calm, unshaken, and ready. The sound of leather soles hitting marble echoed before his shadow entered the room. Marcus wore his silk robe loosely tied, eyes sharp, jawline hard with impatience. He halted, surprise flashing briefly across his expression before irritation smothered it. Again, his voice carried a sharp edge, meant to remind her of boundaries. "You think this is your study hall? I pay you to clean floors, not stain them with your ambition." His volume grew, filling the vast room with a thunder that matched his well-fueled arrogance. He gestured broadly toward the exit, assuming that authority alone would compel obedience. Amara didn't flinch, her gaze stayed steady on him, a quiet defiance radiating from her still posture. She let a few seconds pass, long enough to unsettle him, then closed her book softly, as if protecting secrets written between the lines. "I chose this place because it's quiet," she said, voice even, almost soothing, "and because some truths can only be studied close to their source." Marcus stiffened. "What truths?" His tone betrayed unease. She reached for her budget phone lying face down beside the notes, flipping it over with a deliberate move. On the screen glowed, captured fragments, emails with subject lines referencing rigged bids, images of wire transfers, and the blurred reflection of his monitor displaying insider instructions. Marcus's color shifted from red to pale, though his words fought to stay firm. You don't know what you're looking at. Numbers, jargon, none of it concerns you. Amara's eyes narrowed. I know when contracts are written for friends before the competition begins. I know when signatures repeat identically, as though copied, not notarized. I know city land wasn't purchased fairly. You've hidden plenty in darkness, but darkness can speak. His fists curled at his sides, silk belt knotted tighter, as if strangling his own certainty. You think you're clever, but you're just an intruder in a world you'll never. You imagine that peeking at files makes you powerful. You don't belong at this level. He moved closer, looming, voice sharpened like glass. Yet inside, he replayed the images he had left open, wondering how much she had taken, whether one careless evening had left trails impossible to erase. Amara stood slowly, lifting her books with careful precision, stacking them like fragile valuables. Her flashlight beam dimmed, casting the room into deeper shadow. Ownership doesn't come from silk robes or locked cabinets, she replied quietly. It comes from understanding where the cracks are. Marcus snapped. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Don't bother coming back, not here, not anywhere near my company. One call and no contractor will touch you. He said it with conviction, as if reciting from a script used many times before. He needed to reassert control, to remind himself that dominance flowed from wealth, that his empire was immune. Amara did not argue. She slid the phone into her pocket, balanced her books under one arm, and picked up a pen she had used for notes. For a moment she looked around the penthouse, noting the marble staircase catching faint reflections, the office upstairs glowing faintly, the chandeliers shimmering like stars suspended in glass. This world had dismissed her once already, when applications were ignored, interviews cut short, doors closed. Now Marcus thought dismissal again would reduce her to silence. Instead, she straightened, shoulders squared, and spoke with quiet force. Ever been judged unfairly? Amara's fight shows resilience wins. The words carried past him, not addressed to him but to the invisible presence of every person told they were less. Every voice muted by systemic bias. It sounded like a mantra, an affirmation disguised in calm tones, sliding into the silence like a blade. Marcus sneered, unwilling to admit the shiver it sent through him. You think quoting slogans will save you? I built this city, you're nothing but a cleaner. Amara's gaze locked with his, steady as stone. Cleaners see what others ignore, and some dirt doesn't stay bare. She turned then, her steps deliberate, each one echoing against polished stone. She did not rush. Dignity draped her like armor. Behind her, Marcus paced, fury and dread battling, muttering half-formed threats into the empty air. He told himself she was powerless, that firing her had solved the problem, that staff rotated like replaceable gears, yet a knot tightened in his chest as he recalled her certainty. How much had she truly gathered? Were his confidants as loyal as he imagined? He poured himself whiskey, hand trembling slightly. He drank fast, but the burn in his throat did not erase the image of her calm eyes. Amara descended the marble stairs without glancing back, her cart silent, her posture unwavering. She carried her books clutched close, but beneath the covers lay more than study notes. Evidence catalogued, time-stamped, encrypted, waiting. Her exit was quiet, but within that silence, momentum shifted. The penthouse, once untouchable, had cracks now, hairline fractures widening with each secret she carried out into the night. On the street, she inhaled the crisp air and felt both fear and certainty intertwine. Fear because Marcus was dangerous, protected by money, friends and the city hall. Certainty because she had seen enough to know his foundation was weaker than it appeared. What he thought dismissal would erase had instead ignited the final phase of her plan. She tightened her grip on her books, the budget phone heavy in her pocket, and walked toward the subway with steady step. Her mind mapped the next move: library research, journalist contact, verification. Each step was deliberate, measured, impossible to erase. Behind glass walls high above, Marcus Langston drowned his unease in alcohol, convinced he had severed the He had not realized yet that what looked like a small act of defiance was the beginning of collapse. Amara's quiet dignity that night would prove stronger than his silk, his marble, his chandeliers or his arrogance. She carried more than textbooks into the dark. She carried the blueprint for his downfall, a plan sharpened by patience, fueled by family, and strengthened by injustice. Marcus had fired her to silence her voice. He had only amplified it. The Brooklyn Public Library opened at 9, its glass doors reflecting a cold morning sky. Amara arrived before the staff had finished arranging chairs, carrying a canvas tote heavy with textbooks and her phone wrapped inside a scarf to keep it hidden. She chose a corner table beneath tall windows, away from security cameras, but close enough to watch both entrances. She spread her materials carefully: spiral notebooks, loose papers with scribbled annotations, receipts and flash drives sealed in small plastic bags. Her process was not hurried. Every movement carried the discipline of someone who had trained herself to think like an auditor. She unlocked the phone, screen cracked but still functional, and scrolled through a folder labeled with random letters that only she understood. Dozens of photos displayed figures from Marcus's office screens, wire transfers timed with council votes, email drafts mentioning altered valuations, ledgers with pages bearing repeated stamps. She copied each into an encrypted archive on the library's computer, then printed reference sheets with codes she alone could decode. Notes were aligned in grids across the table, each column detailing dates, amounts and connections between Marcus's shell entities. She worked as if reconstructing an empire from fragments, mapping every fraud with patience sharpened by necessity. Rent hovered like a storm. Her landlord had warned her mother last week about the balance, $50 left after prescriptions had drained most of Amara's paycheck. Her mother's diabetes demanded insulin that insurance didn't fully cover, and Naima's tuition form still waited in a folder, deadlines underlined in red. Amara paused only long enough to press a hand against her temple, then resumed. Each detail she gathered felt like a lever capable of shifting that weight. The library's air smelled faintly of dust and coffee. She noticed a woman nearby, early 30s, curly hair pulled into a bun, tapping briskly on a laptop with press credentials clipped to her back. The nameplate read Lena Carter. Amara recognized her from articles investigating zoning scandals uptown, pieces that had rattled a few council members but stopped short of Marcus's empire. Lena sensed eyes on her and looked up, expression sharp yet open. "You've been following Langston," Amara said quietly, not as a question. Lena raised a brow, cautious. "And who's asking?" Amara slid a notebook across the table, its page open to columns of numbers matching public land sales with Marcus's shell company. At first, Lena frowned, skeptical, then leaned closer as photographs emerged, Marcus shaking hands with contractors, a ledger showing inflated costs and an email header referencing expedited permits. "This is more than rumor," Lena murmured, voice low. "Where did you get this?" Amara held her gaze steady. "I worked in his penthouse. I saw enough to know his empire isn't built on stone. It's built on forged contracts, bribes and stolen land. 6 months of watching, collecting, waiting." Lena studied her, assessing risk. "Why bring it to me? Why not the authorities?" Amara hesitated, then said, "Authorities need stories before they need numbers. You give them stories." She spoke with calm certainty, though her stomach tightened at the memory of Marcus's threats. They spent hours reviewing the dossier. Lena's journalist instinct pressed for verification. Amara answered with cross-referenced evidence. Audio clips caught Marcus instructing an aide to make the commissioner comfortable. Photographs showed a pattern of forged notary stamp. Bank transactions aligned with policy changes announced days later. The pieces formed a puzzle too detailed to dismiss. As the days stretched, sunlight shifted across the table, papers glowing like exhibits. Lena typed rapidly, questions stumbling, tracing connections Amara had already mapped. Tax evasion through overseas trusts, land fraud with rezoned properties, insider tips timed with council meetings. "This is systemic," Amara nodded, quiet confidence radiating. "He believes no one watches the cleaners, but cleaners see what others ignore." Her phone buzzed once, an automated alert about a bank balance nearing zero. She silenced it, forcing her focus back. The weight of bills, prescriptions and tuition never left. But urgency only sharpened her resolve. She imagined Naima bent over scholarship essays, her mother counting pills. Those images hardened her commitment. Lena closed the laptop briefly, rubbing her eyes. "This is dangerous. Marcus has lawyers, friends in government, and money that bends pressure. If we push too soon, it backfires." Amara leaned forward. "If we wait too long, he buries more. I can't wait. My family can't wait." The words carried quiet steel, not desperation but determination. By evening the library's staff announced the closing. Papers were stacked, USB drives sealed, codes memorized. Lena tucked her notes carefully, then looked at Amara with new respect. "You've risked everything. You're not just exposing corruption, you're fighting for survival." Amara gathered her thought, books pressed against her chest. She did not smile. "Survival isn't enough. I need a change, and so does this city." They walked out together, lights of Brooklyn flickering against a night sky heavy with possibility. Amara's plan was no longer theory. It was an alliance, a fuse already burning, and Marcus Langston had no idea the darkness he once dismissed would soon illuminate every corner of his empire. The elite Manhattan Club glittered with chandeliers shaped like cascades of diamonds, and the soft hum of a piano filled the air with an effortless sense of privilege. Marcus Langston strode in wearing a tailored navy suit stitched in Milan, every detail designed to broadcast status. He greeted partners with a booming laugh, raising a glass of whiskey that had cost $500 for a single pour. Servers beer that had cost $500 for a single pour. Servers circled with trays of oysters, caviar and wine older than Amara herself. This was his sanctuary, a space where power was paraded and arrogance polished until it gleamed. He leaned across polished mahogany, marking the very idea that a cleaner could ever graze the surface of his empire. She was sitting there with a flashlight, scribbling formulas like she belonged in my office. Marcus chuckled to his companions, who leaned in eager to laugh at the story. Can you imagine? A woman with bleach on her hands is trying to lecture me on finance. His circle erupted in derisive laughter, the sound echoing against gold-paneled walls. Marcus basked in it, convinced his version of events had already erased her existence. He thought money could bury truth beneath layers of ridicule and distraction. Meanwhile, across the city in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, Amara and Lena Carter sat side by side at a dining table pressed against peeling wallpaper. A single lamp cast a halo of light over spreadsheets, USB drives and stapled notes. Their atmosphere was not velvet and chandeliers, but urgency and resolve. Lena tapped keys with journalistic intensity, verifying the chain of evidence. Shell companies tied to offshore trusts, land deals executed through proxies, transactions routed minutes before city council announced. Amara organized files into categories, her finance expertise turning raw fragments into coherent narratives that prosecutors and the press could not ignore. They traced one transaction linking Marcus's firm to a rezoned waterfront property. The council had announced a change at Marcus's Shell account wired funds at 9 It was not a coincidence, it was choreography. Another folder revealed inflated construction costs, funneled to allies who kicked back portions into private accounts. Amara's meticulous notes cross-referenced every number, every date, every signature. Her quiet confidence grew with each connection. Where Marcus mocked, she documented. Where he drank to forget, she worked to remember. Back at the club, Marcus leaned back in his chair, severing cigars from Havana. These workers think effort equals power, he said smugly. They don't understand that access buys influence. That's why we drink this, wear this, live this. That's why they'll never touch us. His words oozed certainty, but his laugh masked unease. Somewhere deep inside, the memory of Amara's steady gaze lingered, an echo he tried to drown in whiskey. Amara ignored ridicule, focusing instead on clarity. She printed public filings, attaching screenshots of Marcus's internal memos beside them. She constructed timelines showing bribes disguised as consulting fees, loans forgiven when favors were delivered, and board minutes edited to omit this. Lena whispered, "This is airtight, he can't laugh his way out of this." Amara didn't gloat, she simply said, "Numbers don't lie, even when people do." Her bank account alert chimed again, less than $50 remained for rent after insulin costs. She silenced the notification. The weight of her family's struggle pressed against her, but it fueled her focus rather than distracting it. Each fraudulent wire she exposed was another step towards stability, another chance to pay for medication, another shot at her sister's tuition. The urgency stitched into her life made every discovery pulse with higher stakes. The narrative between two worlds ran like parallel films, Marcus performing extravagance under chandeliers, Amara unspooling truth under a dim lamp. His arrogance blinded him to her presence, her resilience sharpened her plan. He dismissed her as invisible while she made him more visible than ever before. Cigars burned low at the club as Marcus bragged about a future project. "We'll knock down those old brownstones, build towers. People will call it progress, I'll call it profit." Applause followed, but beneath the applause his phone buzzed with a headline. Lena had just published about zoning irregularities. He ignored it, too secure in his cocoon. Arrogance insulated him, but insulation was thinning fast. Lena looked at Amara, admiration mixing with caution. "You've risked everything, but you're winning piece by piece." Amara leaned back, exhaustion in her eyes but strength in her voice. "He underestimates me because I mop his floors. He forgets I graduated top of my class. He forgets cleaners watch, listen, remember." She stacked documents neatly, ready for the next step. The contrast could not be sharper. Marcus raised another glass, mocking those who dared challenge him, while Amara prepared evidence that would dismantle him. In cinematic rhythm, arrogance built tension even as truth gathered momentum. "When underestimated, Amara's proving them wrong, will you?" The words rose from the pages like a challenge, not only to Marcus but to anyone who had ever been dismissed, doubted, or diminished. Her resilience was not only survival, It was proof that underestimated voices could dismantle entire empires when given the chance. As night deepened, Marcus staggered into a chauffeured car, blissfully unaware that every boast he had made inside the club would soon sound like the delusions of a man cornered. Across the bridge, Amara and Lena packed their files, determination etched into their silence. The city pulsed around them, alive with secrets waiting to be told. Marcus's arrogance was not a strength, it was the spark that would ignite his fall. The breakthrough came not in Marcus Langston's office, not in a council chamber, but on a dusty hard drive retrieved from an old security system. Lena Carter sat in the library beside Amara, their table again covered in files, when she slid headphones over her ears and watched a grainy video that would change everything. The footage showed Marcus in his penthouse office, a glass of whiskey on the desk, leaning toward a commissioner with casual confidence. The audio was faint but undeniable. Marcus offering support to ace zoning votes, phrasing bribes in polished language, envelopes sliding across polished wood. It was the kind of direct proof journalists dream of, and Amara had known the camera existed all along. She had remembered its placement near the chandelier, noticed the tiny red blink months earlier while cleaning, and calculated that Marcus had been too arrogant to secure every angle. Her foresight was now validated. Lena paused the video, eyes wide, then turned to Amara. "You realize this camera would capture him?" Amara nodded. He thought the view was ornamental, but cameras always serve someone. "I just waited for the right person to notice." They cross-referenced the clip with ledgers already catalogued, dates aligning with wire transfers Amara had photographed, emails referencing expedited votes, and invoices padded for ally. Lena typed furiously, building a timeline that married image, word and number into a narrative impossible to dismiss. Each piece strengthened the others, until the puzzle locked into place. Across town, Marcus sat in his office, unease bleeding into his usual confidence. His assistant, a cautious man named Harris, had been reviewing staff logs. "Sir," Harris said carefully, "I've noticed something about Amara Johnson, the cleaner. Her references are spotless, recommendations strong, and academic history impressive. She graduated summa cum laude. That's unusual for someone in her role." Marcus bristled, waving a dismissive hand. "Degrees don't matter when people scrub floors. She's gone, irrelevant." Yet his jaw tightened. The echo of her words still lingered. "Darkness reveals what you hide." Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Amara leaned over Lena's laptop, her calm presence guiding every verification. She showed Lena how insider trades aligned with property valuations, how contracts shifted minutes before zoning approvals, how Marcus's empire was woven through layers of deceit. Her finance expertise turned complex jargon into clarity. "He created shells to mask flaws, but patterns always betray arrogance," she explained, pencil tapping against printouts. Suspense deepened with every confirmation. Marcus believed wealth insulated him, but insulation was thin. Each document Amara had tucked away now carried amplified weight because the video gave them context. Numbers became actions, actions became crimes. Lena crafted outlines for an exposé, drafting lead sentences while Amara corrected terms, ensuring accuracy that no lawyer could challenge. They spoke in whispers, aware of the danger, but Amara's quiet confidence never faltered. She carried herself like someone who had already accepted risk, someone who had endured enough to know fear could not dictate progress. In his penthouse, Marcus poured another drink, the city sprawling beneath him. He tried to shake off unease but found himself replaying Harris's words. An academic record like Amara's was no coincidence. She had not been merely a cleaner, she had been a wit. He recalled her steady eyes, the unflinching tone, the subtle threat hidden in calm speech. For the first time in years he felt cornered. Amara and Lena pressed forward. They built spreadsheets aligning every transaction, matched signatures with public deeds, and identified forged notary marks that repeated with unnatural consistency. The video was their crown jewel, but the supporting evidence turned it into a weapon that could not be ignored. "This isn't just a scandal," Lena whispered. "It's systemic fraud tied to City Hall, to contractors, to investors. This could shake the whole city." Amara simply replied, "It." The suspense was cinematic, Marcus mocking in his club, oblivious to the fuse burning under him. Amara patient and methodical, foresight guiding her every step. Lena typing with urgency, but where they held the kind of truth that could not stay buried. The penthouse's glittering chandeliers and marble floors now looked less like monuments of power and more like exhibits waiting for exposure. Marcus's unease grew into restless pacing. He snapped at Harris, dismissed warnings, and convinced himself control remained his. Yet when he caught his reflection in the office window, he saw not strength but cracks forming. He thought of Amara's quiet voice, her claim that dirt doesn't stay buried, and for once he wondered if she had already set something in motion. Back in Brooklyn, Amara closed her notebook, files stacked neatly, evidence secured. Her foresight had delivered the breakthrough, but her patience had made it unshakable. The plan was no longer shadows and whispers. It was substance, proof and inevitability. Marcus Langston's empire was no longer untouchable. It was fragile, trembling, seconds away from exposure that would rewrite everything. Their braces rolled before dawn, and by sunrise, New York was awake to headlines that cut sharper than any scandal in recent memory. Lena Carter's exposé sprawled across the front page: tycoon Marcus Langston, tied to bribes, fraud and rigged deals. Subheadings listed tax evasion, land theft, manipulated contracts, and insider trading. Photos captured Marcus shaking hands with commissioners, screenshots of wire transfers linked to zoning approvals, and excerpts from emails he had once believed untouchable. Amara's evidence anchored every claim, each document authenticated, every connection irrefutably. On the subway, commuters unfolded papers, phones lit with alerts, and whispers spread like wildfire. The city that had once praised Marcus now dissected his empire with outrage. Anchors on morning shows replayed segments of the incriminating video, his voice calmly offering support while envelopes slid across his desk. Hashtags trended, protesters gathered outside his offices, and investors scrambled to distance themselves. Inside his penthouse, Marcus sat hunched over a table littered with very documents he thought were secure. His hands trembled as he read headlines quoting figures he recognized, figures he had hidden with precision. His phone rang endlessly: lawyers, board members, associates, each demanding explanations he no longer controlled. The empire he had built on arrogance and secrecy now tilted beneath him, and no amount of whiskey dulled the panic flooding his veins. He replayed the video, voice quivering as he recognized his own words sealing his downfall. Amara, meanwhile, walked to work at the library with quiet resolve. She carried no outward sign of triumph, yet inside her chest pulsed a calm certainty. She had turned notes, scraps, and patience into a reckoning that toppled the titan. Lena's article credited an anonymous whistleblower with unmatched access and insight, a phrase that shielded Amara while amplifying her worth. For the first time she felt the scales tip toward justice, even as her bank account still sat near empty. Marcus raged, pacing rooms that now felt like cages. He demanded that Harris explain how a cleaner could outwit him. But Harris only repeated that her background had been extraordinary. The revelation deepened Marcus's paranoia. He had dismissed brilliance disguised in worn sleeves, mock diligence hiding beneath quiet eyes. Now the world knew what he had refused to see. Crowds formed outside his developments, chanting for resignations, holding signs with words like fraud and justice. Television crews camped on sidewalks. Politicians, once eager for his donations, now issued statements condemning corruption. Marcus's calls to old allies went unanswered. He was no longer an untouchable figure. He was a headline, a scandal, a cautionary tale unfolding in real time. Amara sat at her kitchen table, her mother beside her, Naima peering over scholarship forms, as Lena read aloud sections of the exposé to them. Pride swelled in their small apartment, mingling with relief and hope. Amara had carried pain like a weight on her back, but now that pain had transformed into a weapon sharper than Marcus's money. Her struggle was no longer invisible, it was written in ink across the city, proof that resilience could bend history. Amara turned pain into power. How will you fight back? The question flowed naturally from Lena's article, a line that pulsed through social media, printed in bold at the end of the piece. It resonated beyond Marcus, striking chords in readers who had endured dismissal, prejudice, or silence. It was not just Amara's victory, it became a collective call to action. Marcus stared at himself on television, orange sticker lines announcing investigations, his name paired with words like indictment and fraud. His reflection in the darkened glass looked smaller than he remembered. The empire had begun to collapse, not from external rivals but from within. Exposed by someone he had dismissed as irrelevant. Arrogance had blinded him, now exposure defined him. For Amara the night ended quietly. She closed her notebooks, placed her phone on the table, and leaned back in her chair. Outside Brooklyn hummed with the noise of a city alive, but inside, peace flickered like a candle finally sheltered from the wind. She had not shouted, she had not threatened. She had observed, endured, planned and delivered. The city was different now because she had refused to remain invisible. Federal investigations closed around Marcus Langston like iron gates, slamming shut. Prosecutors filed charges of bribery, fraud, and tax evasion, and one by one, his assets were seized. Properties once valued in the tens of millions were frozen, luxury cars towed from garages, accounts locked by court order. The penthouse that had glittered above Manhattan's skyline now stood empty, its marble floors echoing with absence, chandeliers collecting dust instead of ink. Marcus, who had once moved with swagger, now shuffled between hearings with lawyers trailing him, his tailored suits traded for stark attire that did little to shield him from public humiliation. While Marcus's empire crumbled, Amara's world began to blossom. The whistleblower reward combined with her reputation as the mind behind the evidence, opened doors that had long been bolted shut. A top financial firm extended her an offer, not out of charity, but out of recognition. Her analysis had dismantled a billion-dollar empire, something seasoned auditors had failed to accomplish. She accepted the senior analyst role with quiet pride, bringing with her the same meticulous discipline that had once catalogued Marcus's corruption. Her office overlooked the East River, glass walls catching sunrise, a view she claimed not for spectacle but as a daily reminder that patience could turn shadows into strength. Her family's struggles softened into relief. Medical bills no longer hung over the kitchen table like storm clouds. Her mother finally had a stable supply of insulin, delivered directly each month. Naima, who once pinned brochures on the wall with hope alone, now prepared for her first semester at a university that had granted her a scholarship. Their laughter returned to the apartment, but soon even that apartment was no longer necessary. Amara surprised them with keys to a modest yet beautiful home in Queens, a two-story with a garden where her mother could sit in the sun without worry, where Naima could study at her own desk without the constant pressure of overdue bills. On the day they moved in, Amara stood by the doorway watching her mother trace her hands along freshly painted walls. Tears welled in eyes that had endured too much strain, but they were tears of relief this time. "You carried us when you had nothing," her mother whispered. "Now you've given us everything." Amara hugged her tightly, the embrace carrying years of hardship transformed into gratitude. Her quiet confidence never turned into arrogance. At the firm, she mentored junior analysts, ensuring no one felt invisible, reminding them that brilliance can hide in the most underestimated place. She lectured occasionally at NYU, standing before students as both a survivor of systemic bias and as proof that perseverance could bend even the most rigid structure. Her story rippled across the industry, forcing companies to examine hiring practices, reminding leaders that overlooking talent because of bias meant risking the rise of voices strong enough to dismantle empires. Marcus meanwhile watched the world move on without. From sterile rooms and guarded halls, he read reports about Amara's rising career, each article another twist of the knife. He had once mocked her presence, dismissed her intelligence, but now her name represented resilience and triumph. While his had become synonymous with corruption, he had believed arrogance would protect him. Instead it had blinded him to the danger of underestimating those he deemed beneath him. Amara visited her mother's new home again one Sunday afternoon, carrying groceries and flowers. The garden bloomed with late summer colors. Naima sat on the porch reading, and the air was filled with peace she had once only imagined. She looked around quietly, the weight of past nights spent cleaning penthouses, replaced by the freedom of choice. This wasn't just stability, it was dignity reclaimed, justice earned, and proof that silence does not mean weakness. Amara's courage changed everything. What's your next move? The question hung not just for her family, not just for those who read her story, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated. Her journey was no longer just personal, it had become a symbol. Pain had transformed into power, and resilience had rewritten future. The message was clear: injustice may loom large, but determination, foresight and courage can dismantle even the most gilded walls. Hope had not only survived, it had won. Marcus Langston sat in a concrete cell, the echo of clanging doors reverberating through the halls of a federal prison. Gone were the silk robes, the tailored suits, the crystal chandeliers, replaced with an orange jumpsuit that scratched against his skin and a bunk that groaned under his weight. He stared at the floor, replaying every moment that had brought him here. His arrogance had been his armor, his certainty that wealth insulated him from consequence. Now that arrogance was the only company he had left, he remembered the laughter in the club, the mocking of a cleaner, the confidence that no one could touch him, and he remembered Amara's steady gaze, the quiet defiance that had cut through his power like a blade. He realized too late that underestimation was his greatest mistake. Outside those prison walls, Amara thrived. She no longer cleaned penthouses at midnight. She walked into boardrooms as a respected consultant, her name attached to reforms that reshaped how corporations hired, monitored and rewarded. She spoke at NYU before packed auditoriums, her story weaving pain and resilience into a lesson that resonated across generations. Students listened not just for the details of Marcus's fall, but for the courage it took to stand firm when every barrier screamed retreat. She reminded them that silence had weight, that observation was power, and that intelligence, even when ignored, remained undefeated. Her lecture sparked change far beyond classrooms. Companies began reviewing hiring pipelines, questioning why voices like hers were ever ignored. Diversity was no longer an afterthought but a mandate. Policy drafts cited her case as evidence that systemic bias carried consequences. Whistleblower protections expanded, inspired by the courage of one woman who had refused invisibility. Amara became more than an analyst, she became a catalyst, a symbol of what happens when the underestimated refuse to yield. Marcus heard about these changes from inside, reading clippings passed along by guards or catching fragments of news broadcasts. Each mention of her name deepened he saw his empire crumble not only in court but in culture. He had sought his wealth eternal, yet his legacy was now Amara's rise. His arrogance had written her platform. His dismissal had paved her triumph. Amara's family flourished in the life she had built. Her mother tended to a garden outside their new home, healthy and stable with proper medication. Rana excelled at university, her walls covered not with brochures, but with certificates and research notes. Their laughter-filled rooms once heavy with anxiety, and their pride in Amara was boundless. She carried her success with humility, always reminding them that victory was never just her own. The story rippled across communities, proof that resilience can turn oppression into opportunity. It told every dismissed worker, every overlooked student, every silenced voice, that power often grows in shadows until it bursts into light. Amara stood as the embodiment of that truth. Her calm strength dismantling arrogance disguised as authority. Amara proved intelligence defeats arrogance. Subscribe for more stories of triumph.